Parliament, and I think most of you know in this case, this occasion. Yes, now as we are a little bit behind schedule, I suggest we start immediately so that we have more time for discussions later. Ms. Legrand, the floor is yours, please.
First of all, I want to thank DG Culture and in particular Vladimir Sucha and Laura Casio for enabling us to be here today. I think it might be useful that I tell you something about it, how it all started. Some 30 years ago, I made a visit to the Soviet Union as a writer in a cultural exchange program. I was supposed to work together with a so-called Soviet writer, but in reality it was a dissident. It took us 5 years to finish our common novel. We were called state enemies, KGB was after us, but then all of a sudden perestroika and glasnost came. Our book was sold out in 1 million of copies. We were given the prestigious Arkady Gaidar Award, and somewhat later the Berlin Wall fell. I'm not going to claim that we did that, but we paid a contribution, so art is powerful. Because of all this, being a close witness to all the changes, I was deeply interested in Eastern Europe. All these countries found themselves on the crossroads of capitalism, communism, and maybe democracy. I started traveling a lot to prepare new novels, new non-fiction books, and this is how I got acquainted with the large Roma community in Eastern Europe. And I found out that they were the biggest victims of privatizations, of closing of factories, of not yet extending social structures. And I didn't understand. I learned to know them as very kind-hearted, open people with a big hospitality dedicated to art and not only music. Why were they turned into scapegoats by former communist countries, and hardly 2 decades later into scapegoats in Western European countries that also entered crisis? Why mankind seems to prefer calling scapegoats than to finding new ways out? To do research for my books, I even lived for a while in a ghetto, and I turned with all my questions about the deep poverty, about the abuse of funds, about the corruption, about the suffering, to the European Parliament. I said, do you know what's going on there? And as a result of that, I was invited to join the Parliament myself. So, in 2004, I entered the European Parliament as a MEP. And the first thing I did was hiring a Roma assistant. Because I don't want to work on, I don't want to work about, I don't want to work for, I only want to work with Roma. I hate paternalism, which is a form of racism. We drafted texts, we organized workshops, we traveled a lot, but we were most successful when we started inviting artists to the Parliament. The first one who came was Joaquin Cortés, the famous flamenco dancer, and shortly after that we had a concert in the Yehudi Menuhin space in the Parliament, done by the Belgian band Paco. The show was presented by Miguel Angel Martinez, who was very proud of his friendship with Juan de Dios Ramirez Heredia, also present here today, and honorary supporter of Kid Ramirez. Thank you, gracias. And the place was overcrowded. There were hundreds of people in this small space. Mets were leaning over the balcony, sitting, lying, standing, and the security people did like this because they also wanted to see the show. I remember that the Vice President of the Parliament, Mr. Martinez, started singing Vaya con Dios, a song, also the name of the band. And this evening was really magic because Social Democrats, Christian Democrats, Greens, Liberals stopped being politicians they all became people enjoying music. And this is what art can do. It unites people, it brings people together. Art is our common language. So I don't talk about differences here, I talk about what unites us. And art brings back essence in life. Leaving the Parliament in 2009, I decided to return to my roots as a writer, and I started World Artists Initiative Quetanes. Today we are over 700 artists and scholars coming from 48 countries. At least 80% of us are Roma, Sinti, Kale, Manor, Jenisch. And 15 up to 20% is non-Roma. I belong to a minority and I'm very proud of that. How can we promote integration as artists? I think I first have to state that the majority of the citizens in Europe consider Roma to be a problem. And who wants to include a problem? The main reason for the failure of Roma inclusion is the fact that the opinion of the majority is based on prejudice, is based on extreme lack of knowledge on the culture of Roma, on the traditions of Roma, on their principles. What we as Quetanes can offer are tailor-made programs with theater, film, music, dance, craft, and also lectures on history and on the Romani language, Romani Chip. Programs with which we can go to universities, to schools, to community centers and elsewhere in order to expose prejudice. Because prejudice are a very dangerous breeding ground for populism and far right, for especially those emotions that Europe wanted to eliminate after the Second World War, wanted to eliminate also during the reunification of Europe. It was late Václav Havel who stated in the early 90s that the fate of Roma would become the litmus test for Europe's democracy. I think Europe is more than a healthy euro or a stable bank. Europe is a civilization that needs stable principles and healthy ethics. What we also face is a moral crisis. I told you about the Berlin Wall that I helped vanishing. The Berlin Wall never completely vanished. Today we have new walls, fences and gates surrounding settlements, ghettos and camps that divide European citizens in first and second class people. Can art stop a crisis, a moral crisis? When Churchill was advised to spend less money on art and more on arms, he said, "What am I fighting for then?" Art is not a luxury. Art is a must, like food. Art is softening the heart and sharpening the brain. It is helping us to find new ways out, to find new ways of thinking in the sphere of togetherness. Quetanes, the Romani word for togetherness. I'm not alone here, and that's why I'm very soon keeping my mouth shut. There is Paco of the European Romani Symphonic Orchestra. There is Zoran Tahirovic, beautiful painter of beautiful paintings and other arts. There is Santino Spinelli, and there is also Ida Keralova, who cannot be here with us because she is doing a rehearsal with the children. Children from ghettos, from very poor places. But as Ida says herself, children are Roma's best ambassadors. Thank you.
Thank you very Suarez, thank you for your speech. We all know your tremendous work you did in the European Parliament during your mandate. Yes, I said one occasion where a famous Roma has came to the European Parliament, but in fact there were two occasions, and this was the information about this was widespread all around Europe. And thank you also for mentioning the moral crisis. I think we all agree with the arguments you support this. I suggest now we continue with our second speaker, Mr. Paco Suarez. He is a conductor and director of the European Romani Symphonic Orchestra. He will focus on a great contribution of Roma culture to European culture, in which music plays a prominent role. Here, maybe I will just, a short, how to say, remark, yes. For someone, the previous speaker said that our culture is internal. I think this was Professor Michael Stewart. It was so internal that has influenced the externals. I think Paco Suarez will give a good example of, will speak about examples of how Roman culture has influenced the majority culture. He is also a director of a music school, and he will tell us also how young people react and contribute to the development of the talents of young Roma to be real ambassadors. Mr. Suarez, the floor is yours.
Fuerte aplauso.
Con música flamenca porque es la música de los gitanos de España, y qué mejor manera de empezar a hablar de música con aquella música de la que uno se siente orgulloso. Pero a pesar de que hoy también hablaré de flamenco un poquito, hoy quiero expresaros mi experiencia como director de orquesta sinfónica, como director de la European Romani Symphonic Orchestra, que tiene su sede en Bulgaria y que existe